Hello and welcome to Lightways at Life Astrologer with me, Anna Isabel, and my guest today is Bernie Ashman. Hello, Bernie.
Hey, hello.
And now you are one of two authors, Carmen Turner Schott being the other one, who's written
Yes,
this lovely book called Astrology's Magical Nodes of the Moon.
thank you.
So it's a very popular subject, it seems, on this channel. So it's very
Great,
nice to be exploring it with you.
great.
Let
I'm really glad to be here. Yeah, yeah. The nodes of the moon. I'm often asked about them. So when we got a chance to write this book together, Carmen and I, it was rather exciting. So very exciting, as a matter of fact. So we're finally glad it's finally been released officially. So terrific. It's been a long wait, but that's part of publishing. Yes.
so the title uses the word magical. What do you feel is magical about the lunar nodes?
Wow, that's an excellent question. Um, they have a lot to do with why a person has incarnated in the first place. So when I say magic, they present us with different life paths so we can evolve, like an evolutionary kind of path we might want to go on. And um, it's it's an interesting polarity, the north and south node they're called, because um, they in a way they're there to guide us is probably the best way to say it. And sometimes people feel like they've made a mistake in their life, and the magical thing about the nodes of the moon is that they can redirect us if we get clear of the message they're trying to send us. They have a lot to do with intuition. um, I have found over the many years I've been doing this, and your conscious mind can tap into them, but eventually it's almost like our soul, or an intuitive level, we start to come to some kind of clarity about what those messages are. So depending on the year a person's born, the month can also have something to do with it, even the day sometimes. um, when an astrologer interprets them, hopefully they're giving enough options to know how to make these work for us. But magic, um, I it's funny when we came up with that title, actually, because when Carmen and I talked about it, we both agreed that that's what they really are, because um, it they just point us in such creative directions. Um, they are soul oriented, um, and on the pragmatic level, like on the earth, they can also show us how to get the best mileage out of our relationships, our creativity, um, how to just tune in to our intuitive side, or even our mental side. I mean, they have a lot to do with all aspects of life. But the magic, it's almost like, in some ways, like the term synchronicity that Carl Jung came up with, and he defined it as meaningful coincidences. And if you follow the paths of the node, you often run into these kind of synchronicity experiences. You might just be meeting a person that you needed to meet. It doesn't necessarily mean it's a love relationship. It could be an important friend, a guide of some sort, or it may show you how to even be an influencer yourself. So they are magical. That's a great question, though, to start off with. Yes.
Well, I completely get what you mean because it's and it's the kind of when we use the word magical, it's pretty much expressing the way that we feel about astrology as a whole
Yes.
because of the wonder that we experience when we come across the patterns, the synchronicities, and so it's that feeling of awe and wonder. And I can remember must oh yes, in fact, It would be 3 years ago in May, when I started to organize this channel and started to
Huh,
think about this podcast. And I was going through a lunar node transit
gotcha.
in Gemini on one of my key Gemini planets. I believe it was Mercury. And in terms of the astrocartography, there was I was in a part of the country where that lunar transit was actually most active.
Wow.
And whilst that was happening, I was creating not one, but a typical Gemini style, three YouTube channels.
Oh, wow.
And I was laughing about it with my partner, who said, "Oh, have you noticed that the moon's in Gemini today? All you need now is to be meeting writers and everything will be complete." And we set off for a walk with our dog on the beach. And we got chatting to a lady who was a writer and who happens to be a Gemini.
Oh, wow. That's amazing.
And that's when you go, okay,
Wow.
there's
Very
quite
cool.
a lot going on here. So,
Well,
you were talking about how they show us, the direction that we might be able to take when we get lost and come back to it. But I feel too that they sometimes help us, well, actually, that they often help us make sense of the question, why? And,
yes.
just as an example, I was talking to a friend at the weekend who was expressing some frustration over a situation. And I listened to her. And then on my way home, I was thinking, oh gosh, her North Node is. And that's exactly what she's struggling with at this moment in time.
Wow.
And so
Interesting.
the next day I was on the phone and I said, okay, do you know what? If you think about some of the qualities that you're meant to be developing, this situation is your practice. And she got it immediately and she went, oh, yes, I knew that kind of, but now there it is. And I think this is the beauty of the moon's nodes, is that sometimes when we're asking that pesky question, why, they
Yes.
answer.
Oh, very, very much so. Yeah, I've seen that over and over again in my own life, even, and in my clients' lives, just like you're saying. Um, yeah, it's funny, I got into astrology years ago, like in 1973. And it's been interesting over the years to just see um, in a chart, I've done thousands of charts, and how the nodes, in a way, they kind of glue a chart together because if you think of a chart itself as an ecosystem, just a vast network of energies. And sometimes the questions people do have, it might be related more directly to a transit or a progression, but there's many times it does come back to a node of the moon. It's always interesting when there's a transit of a planet over a node of the moon or even a progressed planet, because usually that brings out a pretty dynamic activity related to that planet in terms of the planet and the node, the formation of those two. So, yeah, but it's interesting to hear what you said about the person you talk to, because I found that over and over again when people have questions, it very often has to do with it often does trace back to the nodes in a very interesting way. So yeah, you can get a lot of clues out of those. I have the North Node in Taurus and the South Node in Scorpio. And Carmen has just the opposite. The North
I
Node
was
in
just
Scorpio,
that.
it's the opposite. So it was really interesting. At the beginning of the book, we talk about our nodes, as just in a personal way. And we thought that was interesting when we started writing together, because our writing styles were a lot alike and our life choices, you'll see some overlaps, but always there's going to be, somebody's going to be different, even if they have the same exact nodes of the moon. So with me, there's been a lot said about the South Node. For some astrologers have interpreted it as somewhat negative. It's something you should avoid. But if you think, they're always opposite each other. So you have to balance the harmony of the two of them. So I would have to say the South Node in Scorpio, I said this in an interview I did a while back for International Astrology Day. And I was asked about the nodes of the moon because of the book. And I said that South Node in Scorpio has a lot to do with the way I have bonded with clients over the years. They just trusted me that I had some experience in what I was doing over the years, and that I wasn't trying to tell them what to do, but just give them some information. It's also been great for research, but I really needed that North Node of the Taurus that I have to ground me, because I have a lot of fire and water in my chart. So there's some Earth through Saturn, but that North Node in Taurus, it was like it kept reminding me that you don't have to create a crisis, through the Scorpio side. That it's okay to have some peace in your life, some calmness, some meditative experiences, enjoy nature. So we're all doing that, whatever your nodes, opposition might be. They're always opposite each other. And it always tickles me when somebody says they don't have an opposition in their chart, because I always say you always have at least one through that
Well,
node of the moon. So, but yeah, so just getting back to your point, they often do help solve a lot of issues in our life if we can get clear about what they are, if they're interpreted somewhat correctly. We tried to do it in the book we wrote, the astrology's magical nodes of the moon, more as a guide, really, just to give some of the key themes of what these are. And we also went through the houses, how they sit in opposite houses. Mine just happened to be in the second sign Taurus, eighth sign Scorpio, and then they repeat. They're in the second house and eighth house, so I get a lot of that repeating theme through that. Not everybody is going to have that, but we just tried to be really clear in the book that there's really multiple ways to express this. So even if you're having a bumpy time, there's always a way to get out of it.
if we're thinking about, for example, you and Carmen, so you have a journey, I'm being very simple about it, from complexity, emotional complexity, to simplicity, which is the Taurus side, the simplicity of living life through your senses and being in your body and really embodying life, if I can put it
Yes,
like,
yes,
just knowing that sometimes it's okay to just enjoy a cup of hot chocolate,
yes,
it,
very much so.
it
Cup of
so
coffee.
that's your her journey is to come out of the sweet green pastures of Taurus
Right.
into the emotional complexity, depth, and sometimes tortuous emotional journey of Scorpio.
Yes.
So you're going in opposite directions, which is not an uncommon situation in relationships. So
Yes.
what do you feel having nodes set up so that they're going in an opposite direction in relationship?
Right.
What do you feel that does?
It, in a way, I've seen it. Excuse me. Um, sorry. I've seen that more than once. And sometimes people really balance each other out. Um, they do really have to be patient with each other, especially early on. And even after so many years, it could possibly even be that way, um, to adjust to each other. It's an adjustment of some sort, because there's, at the same time, though, there's a familiarity because you are in the same sign setup. So it's not like you have a total adjustment to make necessarily, because you're going to see some of the same themes through each other. It's just kind of, in a way, you have to stay out of each other's way too, that you don't interfere too much with each other's choices. You have to be really flexible with those kind of combinations. They can work. I've seen all combinations work, and I've seen them have trouble at the same time. Um, in that particular one, it has more to do sometimes just not accepting the path that the other person's on, which is unfortunate, if that does happen. Because in a way, you can really encourage each other to fulfill what the destiny is or what the choices are that each of you have. So it's an adaptability.
It's funny
Adjust.
that you should say that also, because it is my experience that this switch around of nodes actually can work really well, because the other person intuitively knows where you're coming from.
Exactly.
They
Yeah.
see where you're going, and they've already been there, done that.
Yes.
There's a natural kind of empathy there. But as you say, it's learning to get out of the way. And I find this particularly interesting in relationships between parents and children.
Right. That's a
There,
big one.
yeah, and you can see that they're going in different directions, yes, but what it means is that they're mirroring each other, and the parent recognizes where the child is coming from because they've all been there. And
Yes.
this is the fascination with the lunar nodes, is exactly this. I also find that very often the important people in our lives, the ones who kind of open us up, or in some way help us along the path of that north node, are people of the sign of the north node. So
Yes.
it's quite
Very, very true.
tell us about that.
Yes, because my sun sign is Sagittarius, right at the beginning of it, like 1 degree. My wife's south node, we've been together 40 years. Her south node is 1 degree Sagittarius. So I'm conjunct her south node and opposite her her north node. The funny thing was we just almost felt like we knew each other so quickly. Um, but it was interesting because I I could sense I didn't want to crowd her south node though, because she was developing it beautifully in her own way. She didn't need me for that. But I was just there sometimes to pick her up if she was feeling a bit down at times. And of course, it can work that way too. Her north node's in Gemini. And if I'm a little off, her perceptions of me have been really, really important over the years in a lot of ways, for the way I communicate, the way I write, um, the way I want to be happy, you can name it. So it is interesting how, whether you have the nodes opposite each other, or you may have a planet sitting on that person's node, which happens, it can happen. You see it quite often, actually. So the interplay of those nodes is something else in each life. Parent
Yeah,
to child is interesting too, like you just said.
yes. And I was thinking too about just the sign, and in particular, as an example, my north node's in Aries, and I have to say some of the most significant relationships I've had have been with Aries people. Be-
Gotcha.
because irrespective of whether there's a conjunction to my north node or not, somehow they've opened doors for me. They've
Gotcha.
opened doors for me, and the doors that they've opened have all led me to develop Aries traits of
Okay.
self-reliance and
Well,
independence.
that's
And
cool.
it's been very interesting. It's very in a most positive way. Um, the number of Aries people who've come along in my life. And I can tell you that the first one that I'm aware of, it was at the age of 12. So it's going
Wow.
back that far.
Wow, that's pretty
I
amazing.
see how Aries has been an incredibly supportive sign for me, even though the only representation of Aries in my chart is actually that North Node in Aries. And when I
How about
say
that?
it is so important, and I see this happening for people
Yes.
in many different ways, where friendships or job opportunities often come in through that sign of the North Node, somebody opening that door for them through that sign.
Wow, that's really cool. My my mother was a Taurus, and she had a lot of influence on me creatively. She was a professional pianist, and probably my earliest role model for creativity was the way she dedicated herself to that playing piano. And but you know, it's really funny that you mentioned that. I was just thinking of her because, in a way, I learned a lot about her from her about just taking life as it is, not trying to force it, you know, to happen. Like the South Node and Scorpio side of me sometimes just wanted to bust through, you know. But that North Node and Taurus, I learned a lot from her about just pacing yourself, you know, just taking your time. When you find something you like, you'll probably get disciplined, you know, something like that. And other people that have been Taurians that I've known um, probably have influenced me, you know, or there was something in their chart. Um, my best friend in high school, well, actually, elementary and high school, had a moon in Taurus, and that seemed to also be a big influence. So it's interesting you said that because sometimes you'll pick up from other people that have that something in that sign, sun sign often, um, to open those doors. Um, that's an interesting point. Parent child, because I've worked with parents about their kids at times, and you know when you talk about the nodes of the moon, you know, so in a way you're that's quite an adapting too from the child to the parent's path, way of doing things, of course, and from the parent to the child, trying to help the child evolve or guide in a certain way. I had that happen recently with a mother who was very concerned about her son, and but it was interesting in doing a chart reading for her. She said it really helped her because she could tell she was trying to do too much in the way she was trying to guide. She just needed to let go a little bit because he had a lot of natural talent. And she got up with me recently and said it really that was one of the most important things I could have told her because he gave him enough room to evolve. So you never know what somebody might need to hear, or I've needed to hear over the years from someone. So in the way the nodes of the moon, um, maybe they do help us open up maybe to the right people, the right experiences. So in their own way, whatever nodes you have. It could be Cancer, Capricorn, or whatever. You know, it's really funny in writing this book of Carmen. We had it edited before we sent it. I'm sorry, to the publisher to be edited. We had another professional editor I knew edited first, and she said we didn't tell her what sections each of us wrote, and she couldn't tell. She said she honestly, as well as she knew me, and didn't really know Carmen that well, she couldn't tell who wrote what. So that was interesting to hear. Maybe it was the flip of those nodes of the moon, or just the way we work together. But it's always fascinating. But you know, when you get a chart done, even um, there's so many possibilities for what you can do in your life. um, or how you can move forward and find out why you're here in the first place. And I always say to people, the nodes of the moon, in a big way, pulled us here to incarnate anyway. They have a lot to do with the attracting power of the nodes of the moon, or what draws us to take on a life, to be here. So they have a lot of wisdom built into them, if you tap into them. Has been my experience anyway over the years. So,
Do
yeah.
they do? And sorry, that was that echo again. Um, they do, but I think the beautiful thing also is that I think there's an element of fate here with the nodes, whereby what we're doing is we're unquestionably and without knowing it being pulled into a particular path, the path that we were meant to be taking. And I think that was what I was talking about, in a sense, when I was talking about people who are of the sign of our North Node being the signposts, the agents of pulling us into that
Yes.
path. So I think that this is a beautiful interaction between, call it destiny, call it fate, but also our own interaction with it, our own response,
Right.
which is exactly what life is all about.
Yes. It's really, really well said. I share a lot of that same belief that, um, it's funny too. Sometimes, we get to a point where maybe we start asking a question, or we know we need to knock maybe on a door to get through that door. Um, I remember when I got my first book contract in 1984. Um, I knew I was supposed to make some effort, and I was trying really hard. And I found a book publisher, which shocked me because I had never had one before. And I got one kind of quick, which really surprised me. Out on the West Coast in California, published my first two books. And you never know. In 1973, I just had a feeling something was going to happen that day. And I went into a bookstore, and a book I started reading. I sat down with it 2 hours. It was about written by a Frenchman, Dane Rudyard, who really was a well-known astrologer in the field and did a lot to modernize astrology and bring it into the modern times. And I was completely hooked, from then on. But you never know, what day it might be. It's almost like it is kind of magical with these nodes or life, because you have to stay kind of open to new experiences instead of closing the door necessarily. So yeah, it's always fascinated me to watch other people I've worked with, um, that go through a transit of some sort, like Uranus going over the sun or on the ascendant, and they know they want to reinvent themselves somehow, find a new path that lets them beat to their own drum, something like that, and it starts to happen. It's amazing how it happens. I remember, I was reading something that Carl Jung wrote, and he studied astrology, and he said he noticed when people went through major experiences, it always corresponded to an outer planet transit, which wasn't a surprise for me because it happens, that way very, very often, or we're challenged at that time. So, some people, they say, they have questions about their nodes. They've had a difficult time with them. Say they have like the North Node in Leo and the South Node in Aquarius, and they're the what are called the fixed signs. Taurus, Leo, Scorpio, Aquarius are the fixed ones in the zodiac. and that means you want things on your own terms. Um, and it's great maintaining power, those signs, but sometimes you just have to be a little bit more flexible to let that new insight come in, that new experience come in. Marianne Williamson, I got a book by her one time. I wanted to know what she meant by a miracle. And it was really, she called it an altered perception. And sometimes I've really found it through the nodes of the moon, is how people find it. Maybe they find it more intuitively, it seems like. Something speaks to them in a different sort of way. So, yeah, it's quite a journey, though, those nodes.
Yes, as you might expect, given that this is something that um, speaks of the very experience of incarnation. So the book that we are discussing is called Astrology's Magical Nodes of the Moon, and I will be putting a link to it in the description box. It is a wonderful introductory book to the nodes and to astrology. So if you know somebody who is new to astrology, this is a great gift as well. So Bernie, if people want to find out more about you, if they want to find you, how do they do that?
They could just go to my website, the bernieashman.com is one way to do it. Um, if they wanted to email me, it's just B and B as in Bernie, N as in never, B as in Bernie, Ashman at AOL.com would be another way.
I will be putting I'll be putting the link in the description box.
Thank you.
So, thank you so much for your time today, Bernie.
I really appreciate it. It was really enjoyable. Take
Thank
care.
you. And thank you all for watching. Next time, we're going to be looking at relationships in the chart.
Ooh.
Until goodbye.